We're now going to hop down, so to speak, to Hong Kong, and Craig Smith is joining us from Hong Kong. Craig, thank you. I think you're in Hong Kong, are you, Craig? Where are you dialing in from today?
No, I'm actually in California now.
Oh, so it looks a bit dark outside. I was going to say, yeah. So you're over in California. We're going to today.
Things are darker here in the United States than they are in Asia Pacific right now. So yeah, it's appropriate.
Ah, there we go, mate. There we go. How is California at the moment? Whereabouts in California are you?
I'm in San Diego. We have a home here, so I hadn't seen my kids in 6 months, so we came back to kind of check in on the family, and then I'm heading over to our corporate offices in Washington, D.C. for a few weeks, and then back to Hong Kong.
Yeah, one of my favourite cities in the world, San Diego, so very envious that you're there at the moment, mate. But it's amazing to say this, but in a few months you are going to be changing into your new role. It's certainly been a challenging year for you for picking up even more of the world on a portfolio for you, isn't it? So.
Yeah. Well, the good news is there's only one way to go, and that's up. And I'll be sure to remind my boss, when I started, here's where we were, and no matter what I do, we'll be up here in a couple of years. So I think it's going to be a win-win.
And what's your sentiment like, Craig, then obviously looking after more regions soon, but obviously, from a growth trajectory standpoint, we're record year of signings in this part of the world, which we talk about quite often, and in many other countries in the world, all throughout Southeast Asia and globally, you are doing record signings. So COVID aside, it is a good time for you from a signing and growth standpoint, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even pre-COVID, I mean, Asia Pacific was the fastest growing region of the world for us. And so, it's been exciting. The international division actually will be the growth engine of Marriott for quite a few years, for the most part, the future going forward. But inside of that, Asia Pacific really leads the pack. And we've had a great year. We opened our 800th hotel. It's a JW Marriott in Japan. It's a stunning property. Opened some Ritz-Carltons there. A lot happening in Australia. So we're excited about it. But what's most interesting, and I think that we're in some ways a little shocked about it, is we're actually ahead of pace on signings this year versus last year. And so, up until the middle of the year, we're 30% ahead of where we were doing for last year. And so the growth continues. We think that people, have a long-term look, long-term vision for our industry. And so where the signings continue to go. In fact, the projects in China are accelerating. Some of the builders are actually want to move faster, and they see things coming back. So it's going to be a tough year, but I think everybody, and I've heard some of the other speakers say the same thing, we know the business is going to come back, and intra-Asia business will continue to be very strong.
Yeah, it's interesting when we do talk about that in intra-Asia. Sort of, what's your take on that at the moment, Craig? And sort of, how fast do you think intra-Asia travel is? How close is it getting, I should say, from your perspective?
It's going to open up in pockets. I mean, that's what we've seen, and it's all going to depend on governments. And so in some ways, our plea with the governments is they've got to be somewhat realistic. There's some good testing coming out now. The WTTC has talked about some saliva testing that can be done quickly. And so what we need to get ahead of in the future is the need for people. You can't say to somebody, hey, listen, come on vacation at this resort, but you're going to have to spend the first 2 weeks locked in your room. No one's going to do it. And so much of Asia Pacific depends on tourism. So I think it really depends on the travel bubbles, where they are and how they are. We're seeing that with China, Macau. I think Hong Kong's next. Vietnam's opening a bubble now with South Korea and China. So you're going to see those continue to open depending on the safety of each country and how each country is kind of labeled with the others. But when we break out, the way we see it happening is China's obviously almost recovered. I mean, we're probably going to be 10% off of last year in September, and last month, August, was a phenomenal month for us. And all of that is also just internal demand. Chinese that were traveling outbound before are now going to Hainan. We've got 25 hotels in Hainan, for example, and they're doing better than they did last year to date. So those numbers are pretty positive. So I think you're going to see domestic travel, and then after that, the travel bubbles, and then it's going to be Asia Pacific. Is really going to probably clean up a little bit, let's say, for all the Asian travelers. I think they're going to stay closer to home in the beginning and then start venturing out farther.
Now, if you look at that, Craig, obviously, one of the biggest challenges, obviously, for you has been opening hotels during this period, even from a staffing standpoint. What have been some of your biggest challenges, and how have you overcome those challenges during the pandemic?
One of the challenges actually starts even with development is just negotiating deals, right? In China, our developers now are able to go out and meet and shake hands and things. A lot of the deals we're doing now, we're doing virtually with virtual handshakes. But there's still a tremendous amount of the business that needs to be done in person, right? And when we used to open hotels, we'd fly a whole group of people in to help with the opening opening, the pre-opening, and the training. And we've got to rely more on the domestic. Now, there's an upside to this that's helped us quite a bit, is the fact that we're opening so many hotels gives a place for our associates to work. And so rather than we're able to shift employees from one hotel to another city, which keeps them working longer than we would if we didn't have all these openings.
And if you look at sort of growing, I mean, in the last 2 days, we've been talking to people from all over the world, Craig, and it's interesting how many people have talked about new hotels opening, and then we kind of almost forget about some of those because we are sort of down here. But you have been launching new brands literally all over the region, haven't you, in the past 6 or so months? And new hotels, obviously, we're getting very close here to do 2 W's opening in Sydney and more Ritz-Carltons coming. So what have been some of your highlights and some of your favourite openings in recent months?
I think some of the ones that we've seen in Japan, it took us forever to get a JW Marriott into Japan. And we knew it's going to be a winning brand. It has in almost every other market across Asia Pacific. And so it was exciting to get that in there. The W's and the Ritz-Carltons also are a point of pride for us. We really wanted to see more luxury in Australia. There was a time period that we were rolling around with Courtyards and Marriotts and Sheratons, and we really had this desire to break in the upper tier. And we've seen the demand. The opening of the Ritz-Carlton in Perth was very good. The Westin in Perth has done very well. The W brand is another one. It's just a sexy brand, right? And you guys in Australia, you're getting a little more funk and cool to you. So it's kind of neat to have those brands there for people to go out and spend some time. And that domestic is going to be an important business, right? People are doing that, not just it's sort of with staycations, but they're actually, would rather travel rather than going to Bali right now. I think people are going to the Gold Coast, which is working out well for us also.
And in terms of what else you've got coming, you've also got like a yacht company on the way with the Ritz-Carlton Yacht Company. You've had a Ritz-Carlton Collection brand debut, obviously, in Japan as well. So there's obviously demand in that luxury sector that's sort of getting quite pent up now, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. And, if you compared to, luxury when I was a kid, luxury, the people that stayed in luxury hotels were only the uber rich, the top 1%. And today, people are really spending more money on experiences. And we've all heard about this, but the purchase of experiences is outstripping the purchase of products. And so people will save for that luxury experience, which is creating much more demand in the luxury space. That yacht we have with Ritz-Carlton is sold out. I thought about taking my wife on there to make her feel special. It's not going to happen now, that first couple of cruises, because it's doing really well. In fact, we're already talking about rolling out another one. So, and the luxury is probably doing best in Asia Pacific, I would say. The demand for it is really high in Asia.
And where do you see the future of the company going, Craig? We've seen hotel chains launch their own airlines to do tours around the world. We've seen a lot of initiatives come into place. What are some of the things you think are going to have to happen in hospitality to keep people moving? There's obviously a huge issue with airlines around the world, are in a lot of trouble, quite a few of them. So are you looking at ways to adapt as a business and keep stimulating travel?
Yeah, we are. And so, we have, and interestingly enough, we've become much more proactive working with governments. And I think a lot of it has to do with educating governments. One of the things that we've seen is we're such a dispersed industry that most governments and politicians don't realize how many jobs are created in our space, the knock-on effect of one tourist, coming to a country. And what most politicians do, they always talk about exports and exports and exports, but they don't realize, for example, in Australia, that every time a Chinese citizen comes to Australia and they spend money in Australia, that's an export. Foreign currency coming into Australia. And so teeing it up and explaining it, because, what happens is one side of the government is out promoting, come visit our country, and then the other side is making it difficult with visas or regulations for people to visit. So that's one of the first and biggest changes I've seen in the last couple of years. And then the other one is just, we have to go deeper on things like digital. The world is really changing. And it's not just the digital booking experience, it's everything all the way through where do you want to talk to somebody, where you don't want to, how do you want to communicate. And, the best education for me is to watch my 5 kids and figure out what they're doing. And that's probably what the customer's desire is right now.
And it's obviously been a challenging time for every hotel business, including obviously yours and Marriott's. But there's been a lot of amazing leadership coming out of your head office, including from your president and CEO, and constant communication. Like a lot, it's been sort of from a media standpoint, we've been seeing a lot of communication. He's very much on the front foot the whole time and reassuring staff in particular as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, Arne's an interesting leader. One of the things I actually told him one time, but I've told a lot of other people, if we had an election in our company today, which you don't do for your CEO, he would probably win 99% of the vote. He's that loved as a leader. And one of the things that's endearing is since the beginning of this crisis, he has been all over our case about transparency for our stakeholders. And so all of them, whether it's shareholders, owners, but especially the people that work for us. And he's really taken it to heart anytime we've had to make changes to pay, changes the amount of jobs we have. And he's just a phenomenal leader in that part. And it's trickled down our business. And remember, it starts with Mr. Marriott, though, and the legacy that he kind of created in our company and this desire. He has a tremendous pride in people. And so probably the hardest time in this crisis, and we all know this crisis is going to end. This isn't a forever thing. But the hardest thing is taking care of the people that work for you because, you care about them. They've given their sweat for you for years. But it's also the fact that we're going to need them in the future because we're continuing to grow so quickly. And we want to keep as many as possible. And that, one other point that was really interesting and heartfelt for me was to see the leaders in my organization come forward and say, listen, we'll take bigger cuts to our pay. And so we actually tiered the cuts to pay during this year to make sure we keep as many of the staff as possible. You don't see that in a lot of organizations, in lots of parts of the world. And so it was neat. We were able to keep more people on because those are the problems. So including my boss, he's going without pay this year. The next level down, the next level below that. We've tiered all these things down to save the job of housekeepers and dishwashers and secretaries as much as possible.
And what's been your biggest takeaway, Craig, from Arnie during the crisis? Has there been something he said or something he's done that really summarises it fantastically well for you that obviously we'll never forget?
It's two things. One is he's humanized everything. It's very simple, and you see with a lot of leaders across the world instances where we're just going to come in and cut jobs. And he really takes to heart what's happening. He asked, we were on a call this morning at 5 a.m. California time. One of the first questions is, how are people feeling? He really wants to know how everybody's doing. Now imagine the second piece on this. Imagine he's been going through some really difficult health challenges at the same time, and he never talks about what's happening to him and how tough it is. And you can see it physically on him, even in some of the video we saw it. And the good news is, he's looking 100% better. It's wonderful to see, but he's just been a champion through it. And so, those moments where I want to complain, about what's happening and feel sorry for myself, I got to kind of think, well, I can't do that. I mean, Arnie's, he's working a lot harder and he's got a lot more challenges than I do right now. But, we're going to be okay. The industry's fine. And probably the best thing to look at is the fact that there's continued growth in signings and they're ahead of last year. That's a good sign. But we are going to have to change some things on travel. We're going to have to be more aware of cleanliness in the future. I mean, I think in some ways, cleanliness becomes cleanliness and sanitation are really the new amenities that people are looking for. And it can't just be rhetoric. Guests are going to come into the room or in the lobby. They're going to expect these things and expect to be protected when they stay with us.
That's very true. So I think I'm not going to miss having the sanitizer everywhere. I think it's made the experience a lot nicer. But Craig, thank you so much for dialing in from San Diego, and I hope you've managed to get some sun and enjoy it while you're there. And mate, shame you couldn't be here in person, but we're very much looking forward to having you at the next AHICE, obviously in person when things do get better.
No, thanks again. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.